Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, advanced interrogation techniques are war crimes. The people who engage in them are individuals who are bad, who have shown to be acting in self-interest, and who are shown to have utilitarian calculuses. We think that these people ought not to be part of the medical industry. This motion is from the perspective of the medical associations and a question of what they ought to be doing. Government bench defends a world where individuals who have engaged in or supervised any of these war crimes ought to be banned from the medical industry and the medical associations across the world, while opposition must defend that these people must be allowed to practice. What do we say on government bench? We think individuals who have supervised or engaged should be barred, but we are also willing to criminalize them as well, or allow them to be put in jail or prosecuted for any of the war crimes they committed as well. We think individuals who have done this are bad individuals, and we ought not to allow them in a position where they are put in the other individuals put their lives in the hands of these people. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to prove to you why, on a principled level, these people fit the standards for being barred from the medical association. Second, I'm going to talk to you why pragmatically it's bad for the patients they handle. And third, I'm going to talk to you about why it's bad for the medical industry as a whole to allow these people to continue these people to practice. I don't know if this is mine. So, first of all, why in principle should we not allow these people to continue practicing? What is the job of a doctor exactly? We think patients literally put life or death decisions in your hands. You handle careful operations where one wrong move could lead a dead babe for this individual. You sedate patients and perform surgeries on them, and they have no idea what's going on because for the entirety of the time they are unconscious. They literally allow you to handle whatever decisions for that period of time, for the period of time that you are a doctor for them. Which is why it's very important to always err on the side of caution and trust the character of the doctor is always good. Because the job of a doctor is always to cater to the life of a patient. If you look at the standards by which we ban people from continuing to practice, it's when they've engaged in medical malpractice, for example. So why is this equivalent? We say when you engage in instances of medical malpractice where you abuse a client or shown that you could have done more to save the life of a client and you chose not to, this is equivalent to it because you literally engaged in practices where you tortured an individual and allowed this person to continue being tortured. What are the reasons why we can say your character is bad? Because engaging or supervising these shows two things. That one, you are willing to act in self-interest, and two, you're willing to act in a very utilitarian calculus. And we can say all we want that in the military, it's a difficult situation, it's a different world entirely. But we think it's when you're placed in positions of vulnerability that your principles are most clear. It's when we can identify what you side and what you don't side with. And the decisions you make at that point in time determine how you're going to act in very vulnerable situations. Because when you're placed in the medical industry, every time you're in a surgery room is a vulnerable situation where you have to make a crucial decision of what you ought to be doing and what you ought not to be doing. But what if they say two things? They could potentially say one, you had a chain of command, therefore you had no choice but to engage or supervise these things. But secondly, they could have said that, well, you weren't aware of all of these things anyway. First, what about the thing about chain of command? We think there are many different alternatives you could have taken as a doctor in the military in the first place. First of all, after you engage in these war crimes, you could have spoken about them. And whistleblowers, for example, are given protection by the ICC, ladies and gentlemen. But we think they chose not to do this. But second of all, they could have left their profession also, but they chose not to do this as well. The fact that the medical association has to decide whether or not must mean that there are still people willing to engage in these professions and want to enter the medical industry. But because these people chose to not leave the military also, we think that this is a sign that they don't prioritize any of those and would rather continue on with making money in the civil world. Why do we think doctors can't act the utilitarian calculus? Because your primary obligation is to your client, which means that, for example, if I'm sedated, this doctor could potentially take my organs and give them to somebody else. And perhaps they can say, medical malpractice, you can be sued for that. But how do we know for sure whether or not an instance is medical malpractice or not, ladies and gentlemen? It's difficult for a patient himself to tell whether or not it was an accident, for example, whether or not cutting the wrong vein was an accident. Or how could a patient tell if you could have done more as a doctor to save his or her life? We think those are instances where it's very blurry to tell whether or not it's medical malpractice. Therefore, it's difficult to sue doctors retroactively
or after the fact that it already happened, but to prevent instances of abuse later on. So the conclusion of this is basically, we always want to err on the side of caution and make sure that these people ought to be not allowed. And even if they become whistleblowers, or even if they say these war crimes, then we think they still not ought to be allowed, because even in vulnerable situations, they were still willing to forgo their conscience and engage in these acts of torture. Why do we think it's going to be worse for the patients they handle? First of all, we think trust is very important when you're talking about patient-doctor relationships, because literally, a lot of the treatments that you undergo demand a level of trust between patient and doctor. First of all, they make treatments less effective. This means you're likely to tense up when the doctor's about to inject something in you, which means it's possible for the doctor to shoot in the wrong vein or shoot in the wrong area of your body. Or secondly, this means that patients that you handle may not even be willing to undergo treatment at all. You may not be willing to be sedated and undergo surgery because you don't know what a doctor is going to do to you while unconscious. Therefore, even in the best case scenario where we allow these people to be doctors, we think they're going to be less effective for their patients overall. But second, why from the perspective of the medical industry should these people not be allowed? There are three reasons. One, because the perspective of the medical industry is you want to save as many lives as possible, or cater to a greater number of people as much as possible. But we think allowing these people makes it difficult to do this. And no, this argument is independent of whether or not you have good or bad character. Why? Because one, we think there's already huge mistrust in the medical industry in general. There's a huge anti-pharma movement, huge anti-doctor movement. The anti-vaxxers are growing in number as well, which means anything can be blown up out of proportions and to make people think that, a lot of these people are dangerous. You also can't pinpoint who these medical doctors are because the military can hide them in the name of national security or military secrets. So you don't know who the military doctors are, and you don't know who the military doctors aren't. So likely people are just going to mistrust the entire medical industry as a whole. So what happens? People are just not likely to engage in acts of treatment or want to meet doctors in general. But secondly, this also makes it worse off for the poorest of the poor, because how does medical insurance work? Medical insurance only becomes significantly cheaper when there are more people who are there to be able to spread out the costs. But if there are less people to spread out the costs too, the costs of treatment are still going to be significantly more expensive for people at the bottom especially. So on your side, treatment is less accessible for even people who want to engage in the medical industry and want to receive treatment. But last, you also want people to become doctors, ladies and gentlemen. But if the position itself is less trusting, if there's a huge mistrust against doctors, you don't know if you're going to get a job, the medical industry is shrinking, and there's not a lot of profit to go around, people are less likely to want to become doctors in general. So this makes the medical industry unsustainable. You treat less people, treatments become less effective. Thank you.
We agree that torture is bad, but we think that torture is far worse in a world where the military incentives provide and force the military to continuously keep torturing people in order to get information. But the delineation that happens to a government is that you don't have doctors carrying out this torture. These are unqualified people, and these are people that are likely to cause more damage than the side of government suggests is going to happen. So what's the stance coming from opening opposition? We would accept all doctors back into the civil service. This is to suggest that even if you did commit torture, even if you did supervise a certain crime that happened, not a crime, technically it's torture for people in the US, you would also be accepted back into the civil service. So what is the standard that's going to govern this debate? I think all sides agree that torture is bad. Nobody is going to defend torture here. I think the standard to adjudicate this debate is to suggest if torture becomes worse, and insofar as we can prove it, we win the debate. But before I move in, most of my responses are integrated. But I only have one response to the speaker before me on the idea of mistrust. So I think people can delineate between military doctors and civil doctors. For the fact that number one, they are set in different categories, they specialize in different things. My access to a military doctor is far harder than me just walking to a neighborhood and going to a clinic. The fact that the person doesn't have a military connotation before their name suggests that we cannot conflate these things. I think the reasonable person can make the delineation, and I think that term is somewhat of a wash. Have a seat. Everything else is integrated, I will flag it out for you. The first argument, why is it unfair to disbar this individual? It is important to note that opening government is arguing this debate in the context of a clinical setting, where someone is running a clinic and then having patients. That is not analogous to this debate because this person is literally committing torture. They are not a consensual patient that's coming there and you're doing the malpractice, or where you intended to save that person and then you accidentally cut the vein. It's a completely different context. That's why a lot of their arguments cannot apply. Have a seat. So the first thing, why is it that we cannot hold them accountable? The first thing is that they have no choice. And the reason is as following. Number one, at the point at which you're in medical school, there are a large amount of propaganda surrounding the military, telling you that you have to join the military. Have a seat. That you have to join the military in order to become someone that is patriotic, or that you should fight in these wars and help your dying brothers, because that is the one proper way to be a true American. Note this is a highly emotional argument that hinges on the most important and the most vulnerable aspects of an individual, especially seeing that we're living in a world post 9/11 where people's vulnerabilities and their fear of terrorism is incredibly high. That's why these people are coerced into joining the military. Have a seat. But what about when they are in the military? Number one, I don't think there's any alternative. They cannot opt out of the military for a couple of reasons. Number one, the moment in which you join the BMT, or the moment in which you agree to becoming a doctor, there are long tenures that you are forced to commit. So more often than not, you have 6 years. If you choose to opt out, you get punished by the military. Have a seat. Or the fact that you have to pay a large amount of remittance money in order to pay back the military for the promise that you broke to them. Have a seat. The second thing then is that let's talk about the competitive nature of the sport. So more often than not, people that join the military go there because the medical industry is so competitive to the point where they literally just could not find other jobs in other hospitals that exist. Right? That's why they were forced there. That's why they, to a large extent, have no choice. But what about the process? Have a seat. What about the process of just the torture being carried out? So regardless of how you feel about it, the fact that you are in the military and you have signed all these contracts and you have taken this pledge means that you cannot disobey these orders because of two reasons. Number one, you will literally be arrested and you'll be tried and you'll be charged. And there's a couple of things that it's okay for you to guarantee your own self-importance. It is okay for you to prioritize yourself, seeing as you were coerced and forced into joining the military to begin with. This is the reason as to why we cannot hold these people accountable. Did they do something wrong? Yes. But all the context that surrounds them suggests that they were victims of these circumstances for all of the reasons that I suggested. Have a seat. Right? I think a parallel to this is just how the law recognizes mitigating factors, such as when you're acting under the influence, or such as when you're possibly have a seat, or such as when you're maybe committing an act but you were under duress, right? These are the same analogous to it. The second thing then, here's why torture is worse in the world of government. Firstly, torture is still going to be administered for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's necessary. Since 9/11, this has been the common tactic of attaining information. In fact, it's been highly successful when it comes to extracting information from ISIS operators. That's how we had potential intel when Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was in Syria. That's how we had targeted strikes in these areas. It is successful, it is important, that's why the military will continue using it. Have a seat. But now in a world where people know that they are potentially going to be disbarred from joining the military, doctors are not going to join the military. And there's a couple of harms to this. Number one, the people who will now carry out torture will be people like your standard soldier, or maybe it'll be your officer. Why is this intrinsically harmful? The way torture, I'll take you later at 6. Have a seat. The way torture is currently administered now is by qualified doctors, and there are already thousands of deaths. These are people that have been trained with medical degrees. These are people that have specific tactics to make sure that you don't drown during waterboarding. These are specific people who have been trained to make sure that you're not hurt. If these people are causing people to die, I don't know what a standard soldier that doesn't have that same level of training is going to do, or what the person that doesn't have that same level of experience is possibly going to commit. In fact, I think that is going to go for the most painful tactics, because that is the most tactical and that is the most attainable version of it. That's why the torture you get in the world of government is far worse. It still exists and it's far more harmful. That's why we win this comparative. Before I move on, yes,
if your standard is that people are victims of circumstances that are under duress, in your world, when a doctor kills a patient because he's under duress, would you not allow the patient to sue the doctor?
Okay, so if they kill the patient in the military, yes, we wouldn't sue them. But if they kill in a civil service, then obviously you can, because it's not the same thing, guys. Civil service and the military context is not the same. Stop trying to conflate the debate. Second thing, let's talk about this. In the world of government, you will have less information on torture. The reason is as follows. The way in which that we get information currently is by leaks. So in the case of Chelsea Manning, the reason as to why we knew she was being tortured post the CIA leaks was because a doctor conferred with the New York Times. The reason as to why they were able to do that was because they had a comfortable exit to the civil service ready and available because they ended their tenure. In the world of government, that exit and that fail-safe doesn't exist. So there are two incentives here. Number one, these doctors would bury information related to torture to make sure that they can transit to the civil service if they wanted to. It's not about whether they want to, it's just like you have that option, and having options are generally pretty good. The second thing then is that they will not leak information to you anymore. So there's just too much risk. You're going to either be put in prison and you can never get a job as a doctor anywhere else. This means a couple of things. Number one, we have no accountability. We don't know how torture is being carried out. We don't know who is sanctioning the torture. We don't know where to go to Congress for who to point to. Torture is bad. But unfortunately for the military, it's effective. It'll still happen, but in their world, it's carried out by unqualified people.
Hello. Sorry. Okay. I will resolve 3 questions in a speech. The first is to prove that these doctors don't exhibit a level of character expected of other doctors that exist in society. Secondly, I'll prove to you why their said house harms the doctor's profession and why that's a terrible thing. But lastly, we'll prove to you why we reduced torture and extortion of information, because all sides of this house agree that removing or reducing torture is a good thing. First, no, it's 30 seconds. Okay, so first, what is expected of the character of the doctor? Let's assume the best case scenario of the bench, opposition, that they are not evil individuals, that they just followed orders, and that they didn't actively harm the person were trying to supervise the individual. Why do we think that this character is still a bad thing and so doesn't deserve to be a doctor? First, we suggest that what is expected of a doctor is that they have a high level of character. And the reason behind it is because we can't police doctors all the time. All the time. Why can't we do that, right? Because we can't continue suing. There's a lot of times when you have to loan and it's just relying on the trust of the patient. So, the character of a doctor is incredibly important. And it's not just about your ability to do harm in the future, but also about you constantly searching for the active good, which means that you'll try your best to cure your patient at any point in time. We suggest if you yourself show that you're a utilitarian doctor who cares only about following rules, but not about following other things, it is unlikely for you to be able to prove no that you as an individual are a good person to begin with. What were the responses from opposition? First, that this is not a consensual relationship, because unlike a normal doctor or a patient relationship, this victim, this torture victim, was not a patient to begin with. We suggest that in med school, they teach you that torture is a bad thing, and you should never have you have to practice non-maleficence, which is that you do no harm to any individual that exists in society. You violating that contract, even if it's not a contract signed with your patient, is still a proof that you're willing to violate your vows as a doctor, and therefore you should be held as important. But secondly, they claim that you are coerced to join the military, that you're coerced to stay in the military. Our first response is no, you have multiple possible options. You can leave the military at any point in time. They can force this in the military, because that's also war. But secondly, to the extent that there's some level of coercion or pressure that affects your choices, These things also exist in the private profession. What am I talking about, right? So if you work in the hospital, for instance, you probably also have a boss who's a doctor who will tell you what to do. Your client can also pressure you to do specific things, go against your interests as a medical professional. But you have the obligation to resist these things, because if not, under yours and house, you're not able to prove you're capable of standing by your principles, independent of any of these economic pressures whatsoever. We would suggest that as a doctor, your obligation is not to enrich yourself, but to first help individuals in the process. This proves they are not capable of being held, they're coerced, and they succumb to coercion. But last, they say that go against the military because you will be put to jail. We suggest, no thank you, as they concede, torture is an evil thing, torture is a war crime. So you report the torture, or you not doing anything, cannot be trial for the military, because it's far more likely they'll publicize it, and the military has an active interest to keep you silent. So I'm pretty sure they'll perfectly fine with letting you go, because it's better for them than the publicity of them being a torture institution or army that harms individuals. But secondly, we would suggest the entire society, as far as we allow this jail to happen anyway, so I'm uncertain this level of coercion prevents it from making choices. All of these things prove that you have to display a level of character, and you participating in extortion harms level of character based on fit to be a doctor. For one,
If your principle is that insofar as you were somehow complicit in a harm, you should be punished, would you disallow soldiers that have partaken in wars to join the civil service?
Yeah. They've done one crimes, yeah, sure, go ahead, put them in jail. Yeah. Okay, so next, we want to point out that there was barely any response coming from that about the fear you have in the medical profession. We suggest that this is an important thing, right? Because before doctors are able to cure patients, they have to have patients to begin with, and we think that the fear we have in the military and being tortured already gets irrational, independent of whether or not the doctors are good. It's a good thing for the medical profession to have a stance. But last, how do we remove or reduce this torture that exists right now? The premise of the opposition bench is that because there are less doctors in the military, that means that the torture will now be done by officers and random individuals that exist. We would suggest that that is a good thing. And here's a couple of reasons for that. We suggest that torture is not as easy as you think it to be. It's a complicated process where you have to balance specific interests. Balance between killing the individual and keeping him alive. That means doctors know how to keep the person alive to make sure that the torture can be prolonged for a long period of time, and therefore have a longer exposure to extracting the information. If it is a random individual who doesn't know the medical practice of keeping individuals alive, it is possible that person dies in the process of it being tortured, and that the information is no longer there, and therefore it's no longer worth the risk of entering torture to begin with and being found out. We would just make it far less likely to be found. But secondly, you also have to know between balancing of being a good cop and a bad cop, because the more effective measures, as they pointed out, work because these doctors are the one doing it, and making it seem like you're trustworthy to the individual because I'm carrying out for your best interest. If you have a military individual who's only purely bad cop, it is harder for you to convince an individual to buy into a specific character, and therefore it's far less effective for you to be able to extract the information under your surveillance. Why is effectivity an important thing? We will see that maybe in the short run, there are some people who will be harmed in more disproportionate manners. But over time, when the military realizes this is not an effective source of information, it is not worth the risk of all the possible WikiLeaks articles that will be posted against the US military, and there's a greater incentive now for you to face it. The last point we talked about was whistleblowers. We would suggest that whistleblowers, there are senators, can be absolved, and in fact more incentivized to be absolved, because if you know, if you're found out, you'll be disbarred for the rest of your life. It is better for you not to report about your oppression cases, and therefore you're far more likely to get beats to begin with. At the end of this debate, we'll only prove you by not deserving of being a doctor. You've also proven under your house, you're far less likely we're far more likely to reduce torture. We're far more likely to develop the medical profession. We're very proud to propose.
problem with opening government leaders debate is that they assume that the politics of a country or that the push from your Congress to get information from these terrorists is suddenly going to subside in a world where you don't have a doctor in the vicinity. That perhaps the value of that information is no longer going to be like as valuable anymore and as worthy of a push to get that information in a world where you don't have that doctors. If we can sufficiently prove from opening opposition that the value of the information is significantly more and that there will be a great drive under OG's world to continue to push for that information, even if it means using like significantly heinous techniques and enhanced interrogation techniques without a supervised medical personnel on the ground to at the very least ensure that this person doesn't die at the end of the day, we win on a comparative of better torture techniques. They also don't suggest at any point why torture is no longer going to be important anymore. Because note that the response is required to explain why torture is no longer important is to tell me why the information is no longer going to be valuable for the state at the end of the day. Insofar as the state information is valuable, so thank you, there will be a push, there will be a drive for torture to continue. I have a couple of responses to the speaker before I talk about whether or not this doctor is a bad person. Actually shouldn't matter in this debate, but like whether or not the information that we get at the end of the day through leaks, why is it more likely to happen in the hour? What can we do with that information? Responses to the speaker before me. The first response I have is the parallel to how this is analogous to a hospital setting where your head doctor is now pressuring you to do the surgery. Well, this is largely not analogous, no thank you, because in the military setting, you literally have acts and consequences to not performing that action. In a surgery setting, you are literally just performing the action as a part of your job. So is this analogous to one another because you don't have acts and consequences to punish you when you don't commit that particular action at the end of the day. So it's a complete underwhelming and that parallel to draw in this debate to suggest that instance is as overwhelming as the military setting. But it also works in tandem with all the coercive forces that Navin told you about. In a military setting, when you don't perform that, you are coerced by your setting to literally push for you to be punished because you are often in a highly confidential setting with a lot of highly confidential information. If you are someone who is a doctor who is saying no in that instance, that's literally a push for the state to perhaps sanction you in a world where you go out. You are far more more afraid if you leave the military setting at the end of the day. You are coerced in this setting. I don't think OG suggests why these individuals are not coerced. No thank you. The next thing they want to argue is that complicity, any kind of complicity is equal, it means that you must face consequences at the end of the day. And the appeal why they were just we will punish all soldiers at the end of the day. Oh my god, this literally does not at all engage what Navin said about how the coercive settings in the setting, coercive elements in the setting is the reason why you can't adopt agency over making those decisions. The fact that you are enacting something for someone else suggests that you are not liable to the intentions of that action. Literally the law recognizes mens rea and actus reus because we realize that intent is an important part when it comes to punishing individuals. That in fact, if you have an intent, you should be significantly more liable for that action. The fact that the law recognizes that adoption of intent is a great part of culpability means that in this instance, you cannot punish this person because they weren't at all part of adopting that intent, right? No thank you. But the last thing they want to suggest is that, it's okay, we will let people die anyway. People die means that people are no longer going to push for information. Here's why they're going to keep pushing for information. If I draw you a parallel, for example, in Abu Ghraib, which is a prison, a literal torture prison in the Middle East, they literally profile anyone who's at all suspicious in the streets to be brought into Abu Ghraib to be tortured as a result of getting information. The fact that the information is important is to fulfill the political agenda of America to be able to curb the Taliban or any terrorist forces in this area. The fact that there is a push to ensure that there's information to curb these forces means that under their world, they're literally going to profile significantly more people. And the more people die, the more people they go out, the less the metrics for you to think who is suspicious in this area is going to decrease and decrease. That's a world where you keep having the push to get the information and you're more likely to turn to far more desperate and on a quantitative basis, far worse techniques to get more people. That means on a metric of where people die more, you lose more people. People are dying under your world. But in fact, a large proportion of these individuals aren't even people who are culpable for that action. I don't know why they're being killed and why them being killed is significantly more morally okay than perhaps the morality or the ethics of a doctor in this instance, right? I don't think on the comparative they get away with morality. Why the character of the doctor isn't bad and what can we do with this information? Before that, sure.
Information is only valuable if you look at what it costs. Because the moment they find out you're torturing people lose trust in the military. people will want to become soldiers. People will want to give war bonds, which is why it's not as valuable to get information.
For centuries we have known that America has been waterboarding individuals and using enhanced interrogation techniques. Even in that instance, there's so many people enlisting to the military. There's so many people still even thinking that getting the information is so important. In fact, Republicans really believe that we should use enhanced interrogation techniques to get more information. I don't know why under now we are going to have people like opting out or like not having any leaks. Why are you more likely going to get like leaks in the hour, or why people are more likely going to release this information? I think the first thing I want to say is like there is no self-interest, because I think Odi suggests that the doctor has adopted a self-interest to carry out this action in Mika's speech. There is no adoption of self-interest because you don't actively benefit from the information you get from that particular the patient. The information that you get that shows you where the closest like sleeper cell is, or where the closest like central authority for the terrorist organization is, literally does not benefit the doctor in any way. It only benefits the state. Therefore, the transaction between the state and that particular like prisoner, the beneficiary is literally only the state at the end of the day. So I don't know how these doctors at all benefit at the end of the day, rather than just acting under coercion. But like, why are you more likely going to get information at the hour? I think Naveen already did a good job in this. I think in a world where you're less likely going to face consequences, is a world where you're more likely going to come forward and seek that release that information. In a world under government, I know that if I'm a doctor and I was complicit in this instance, I would not want to leak that, because that means I have to be charged for murder. That means that I would literally have my civil like service being foregone. That is a cost to me and an increased burden for the doctor under the hour. I don't know why the evaluation of the psyche of this doctor is going to be, oh, I'm willing to forego my civil service or my career, or even serve a murder sentence for exchange of the information. In a world where you make the burden a lot lesser, is a world where you're more likely to get information that we can act on in Congress. The fact that we know what kind of enhanced interrogation techniques that's being used, the number of people that's being killed in this area, what is the scale of that, the torture that's being conducted. These are information that you're far more likely to get under our, that's information that we can act on far more significantly. In a world where you make it significantly hard and a greater cost to the doctor, there's a world where you don't get the ability for the doctor to at the very least come forward with this information. Information is very important in this debate. I think arbitrating where you make it easier, I think the doctor's far more able to walk away with less consequences than our, because that information is more important.
Can we switch on the music? Okay, cool. When the CIA documents were released about how enhanced interrogation techniques were both counterproductive to US interests, the first response Republicans had was, we have doctors on board, this is a professional thing that we are doing, and it's actually quite sustainable, we're effective in getting information. The single most powerful tool we have in the disposal of Republicans or people who are for interrogation is that it's sustainable, is that it's medically approved, and that we're going to get that information for you. Every step we take to make it harder and harder to get that information is a step closer for us to oppose interrogation. So this debate is less about what happens in the civil field. Because for all we care, doctors and the civil field, I don't understand how we interact with one another. This debate is about how we minimize the way in which people advance or support advanced interrogation. We think in the closing government we will prove that we will sustainably get opposition to this, that will remove our capacity to do this. Right. With regards to the opening government, two things I want to say. First is this rubbish about duress. First thing I want to suggest is duress does not apply to doctors. You have a duty of care independent of the circumstances that exist. That is why, for example, if you're off duty, someone is in an accident and you're not on duty or whatever, and the person is going to die, you still have an obligation to go and help that person, even if you're running away, you're running like a really rush, you're in a rush or anything. The reason is because you have been given an obligation, because you were given professional education. You were in a position where you were supposed to be able to deal with humans dying on the street. The average person wasn't in that position. Your victims or your prisoners are also under duress. So if everybody's under duress, the person with legal and professional mechanisms ought to be held to a higher standard than exists. Second, it actually isn't duress. In this scenario, they have to put duress exists symmetrically, and everybody doesn't opt into the model or cannot opt out of the system. But a lot of doctors came out in opposition to it. They produced information that led to the CIA leaks. So clearly, some people can act independent of it. So duress doesn't apply symmetrically. So you can't say it applies like mens rea and actus rea, because that applies universally to individuals. If some doctors can exit out of this, clearly duress is something you can combat and you should combat. Based on these two things, we think the opening opposition does not prove that the duress is higher than these patients that exist. Second, they don't prove that the doctor is, this warrants the doctor voiding the duty of care. So this argument makes no sense. The second thing about this torture becomes worse in their world because army people will do it. The first thing I'll suggest is, yes, army people But in a world in which it becomes harder and harder to justify torture because you don't get information, these people are literally dying because your army men don't know how to interrogate them sustainably. This is a world in which people are less likely to opt into torture. But second and most importantly, it becomes harder to justify torture because for every person that you die, there's currently an opposition, the Muslim community, the Democrats that suggest it is harmful to these individuals, that indeed there are people dying. Republicans say, well, we're on the path to getting torture. We've been doing it for 2 years. The doctor is part of this procedure. We're going to get there one day. This facade of we are going to get there one day is the most sustainable way we currently detract from the discussion on torture. You make it more sustainable. If 1 or 2 people die an hour, eventually we'll die because we have no results to show for it. We say that's how we get torture out of it. Sit down. Right. Argumentation. The first part of this, I want to present a principle that we think the opening government does not. Because I think self-interest isn't as concrete in this debate. Because to be quite honest, doctors are profit-oriented. I don't know what self-interest is. The standards you ought to judge doctors by are the standards the medical community has set for every doctor. These principles are are blind to every individual. Doctors, whether in the military or in the civil service, are bound by these current 2 standards. What are they? The first is you cannot use human beings as a tool or a means to an end. The second is you must effectively give people a meaningful life. Here are ways in which the opening government allows doctors to be principally inconsistent with this. Whether it's in the military field or in the public field, you have no right to pick and choose your principles just because of the context you are in. The first is using humans as an end to a means. The reason for why, for example, you can be buried without your organs being removed, even if there's a shortage of organs, is because we recognize the human body is first. You have a right to your consciousness and the way your body is treated and a primary duty of care because you're interacting to save yourself. Second, in the medical field that exists right now, if you do want to opt into medical trials, even if we need human beings to find the cure for cancer, we respect your choice and decision. The reason is because we don't justify any social need in this world with the use of a human body. So even if I believe the open opposition that we can get information, we can solve the Taliban, that is immaterial because you are literally using a human life to get to that means. Doctors have no right to decide that for that patient. The second is meaningful life. In no scenario can a doctor decide to increase more harm. If you are a doctor in interrogation techniques, you are literally causing this human body to be alive, to be harmed. So you are the reason why there is more pain and torture in this world. This is akin to forcing someone to chemotherapy when they don't consent to opt into chemotherapy. This means that the opening government, open opposition, has a world in which doctors are avoiding the 2 primary duty of care of a doctor. This is the principal justification why doctors cannot be allowed to do this, whether or not it exists in the private sphere or in the public sphere. This is morally unjust. Second, why do we think this will reshape the interrogation techniques or the way we engage war crimes? Opening is right to suggest that torture will become ineffective. Here is the way we create sustainable opposition that is likely to get us away from interrogation techniques and towards more humane methods of treating this individual. The first, let's know what happens. If you're a doctor, the reason why currently doctors are so for entering the military is because they know they can do both. They can be a military doctor, once their time is over, they can go back to the civil service to make a lot of money as a result of this. When we remove the civil service out of this calculus, they know that once they leave the military, they have no more career. This also comes with the fact that there's reputational damage. The medical association is going to publicly shame you. This means that we create high returns from entering the military and becoming a military doctor. What happens as a result of this? You are right, they'll start using army men. But what happens as a result of using these army men? The first thing I'll say is torture becomes a lot more harder to sustain. People will drown. Individuals are more likely to be harmed, and torture methods aren't going to be sustainable because these people are likely to die. What is the trade-off in the closing government? A couple of things. The first is we think the state's defense of torture becomes harder to support. For example, Republicans, whilst there are so much data that suggests interrogation is inherently bad, the one reason they have to counter this is medical opinion. This is specific professional knowledge that the average public doesn't have the capacity to dispute. Oftentimes they believe this wholesale, and the reason why they believe this wholesale is because it comes from a position, sit down, of power. As a result of this, the Republican Party or the individuals that support torture have been getting away with this for the longest periods of time. How do we change this? A couple of ways. The first is we think medical professionals will actively speak out against this and actually prove that these things are inherently bad. Once we get this voice, there are a couple of things happen. The first thing we will suggest is a vast majority of people will stop believing this propaganda that inherently one day in the future we're going to get to this imaginary information that is good. In this scenario, the push, for example, to shut down Guantanamo when Obama started, but that ended, is more likely to be sustainable because we have the capacity to opt out of this current mechanism of we will get information anyway. But thirdly, we think the resistance to this is likely to be better funded. In a world in which people no longer tie the medical profession to war crimes, to even interrogation tactics, the average individual is more likely to fund the medical association's opposition. Muslims, people who are liberals, all these individuals are likely to fund this opposition and it's likely to be sustainable. This is a world in which we are more likely to get things like suing the state for these negligence cases. And this is the world in which professional opinion is likely to be stronger. Because note, if we do nothing and we continue with the status quo, this is a world in which torture becomes sustainable, harder to oppose. Every push we have people who say it's professional, it's medical. What about the future information? We think we remove that cloud, and for those reasons, we make it harder to make torture accessible. We're proud to propose.
I'm in agreement with the fact that it's morally unjust to keep people alive and torture them. I think this debate is about which is the lesser evil. The lesser evil is where torture exists, or keeping people alive exists, where people are less pain, where we're less likely to arrest more people and torture them in order to gain more information, where we're more likely to be transparent about hate laws and the fact that we are undergoing a lot of torture activities. In my speech, I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to make a more reasonable case for the opposition that's not based on soldiers taking up this job, but instead less qualified professionals. Because the opening government is right when they point out that the opening opposition argument is flawed, because if any soldier or any official does it, it's not torture, it's not effective anymore, right? Because they die, right? So you can't get more information from them. So I don't think it's reasonable that once this policy is implemented, that the military will just take any Tom, Dick and Harry soldier to become the torture administrator. What they are likely to do then is to reduce the standard or the bar that is set to become a medical doctor in order to meet that shortage of doctors, right? Because the opening opposition's premise is still correct. Torture is very valuable to state governments in terms of getting information. So the question then now is, how do they continue to get said information? They lower the bar to become a military doctor, right? So the kind of people who join don't intend to become civil service doctors anymore. They don't intend to practice in the civil area. They just train to become doctors, to become military doctors specifically, right? We will argue that this is dangerous. The reason why this is dangerous is because these are individuals who are likely to be able to keep these individuals alive, in the sense that you can give them morphine, you can make sure that you can amputate them if you feel like at any point in time it's the easiest thing to do in order to fight an infection. Because you are less qualified, you are unable to fight the infection yourself, you are likely to take up very quick resolutions to keep them alive. But the kind of pain that these individuals endure is likely to be a lot higher, right? As opposed to if a more qualified doctor who intends to go on and practice in the civil service is likely to be able to administer. So the point we're making here, that it is not reasonable for opening opposition to say that all people, like any soldier, will do it, but I think a less qualified doctor will do it, and that doctor will administer more pain to these individuals. And in dealing with closing government specifically, closing government's extension relies on the premise that if we have less information, people will realize this and there'll be more opposition to torture. There are two responses to this. The first is, how will people realize there are less information? It's not like the military shares the information that they gain from these torture methods, right? There's no database of how much information we've gotten from terrorists, because people don't share this thing at all. I don't understand how you eventually get the kind of opposition against these military practices. But on a second level, we will argue that if the military is truly facing a problem with less information, this is what they are likely to do, right? Because if it's true that people are now more likely to die, then the government is more likely to arrest more people, right? Detain more people under Guantanamo Bay in order to gain more information, because right now, if the people are dying too quickly, the only other solution to continue this mess is to arrest more people and gain more information on that front. And the reason why people can't oppose this as much is because it's hidden, right? To the point that the way you arrest people is hidden. Obama has tried to close Guantanamo Bay for so long, and it's impossible because of opposition from the Pentagon and the ability for the Pentagon to hide a lot of these things. Individuals in the United States are very, very supportive of the things like the Patriot Act because they think it's very valuable to them, right? So to this point, we would say that there's very little accountability mechanism to the way the government operates when it comes to national security. And to that extent, we would argue that it's very, very easy for governments then to hide how they arrest people. So the comparative it is then is that even if more people die quicker on our side, at least there's less people than on your side will arrest more people, torture them for a period of time, and then let them die. And I think that the number of people who end up going to Guantanamo Bay itself is likely to increase a lot higher, right? And here I think I want to quickly just deal. I forgot to deal with opening government. Like the argument was kind of weird because their argument was that for some reason, because the character of the doctor is bad, he's likely to be technically a bad doctor. So I'll answer 2 questions in response. Firstly, are the doctors evil in and of itself? And 2, even if they are evil, does that make them bad doctors? So the first, are they evil? I don't understand why just because they are utilitarian and not deontological, that makes them evil, number 1. Number 2, I think these are individuals who signed up to be part of the military to serve their country. There's some value in that somewhere. I think that doesn't inherently make them evil, right? But more importantly, I think even if they are evil, that doesn't make them bad doctors, i.e. they don't need to have good character to become a good doctor, right? Because plenty of doctors are assholes and they are in the medical industry. The reason why they continue to be valuable in the medical industry is because they want to make money and they don't want to be medically malpracticing in those industries, right? So it doesn't make sense that these are doctors who are likely to be shit as doctors because they want to make money, they want to treat patients, they want to get promoted, they want to be in top hospitals. And a lot of times these are people in the civil practice, if they're not in hospitals, meaning people have the choice to opt out of this doctor's service if they think that the doctor is truly shit. So I think the opening government is truly out of this debate. I'll take them.
Okay. So, in a world in which the Republicans or the government cares for getting as much information as possible, in which one they're likely to detain Muslims more? In a world in which they know there's a path to an end, or a world in which they can try, but it's a futile cause in their work?
So, obviously it's not a futile cause, right? The logic here is, if we increase the quantity of people that we can arrest, that means the chances of us getting more information is a lot higher as well. Because as I suggested to you, the kind of doctors that we hire, and this was the premise of that argument earlier, the kind of doctors that we hire are individuals who can keep these people alive, but are likely to put these people in a lot more pain and debilitating positions because they're not qualified, because they're not under the medical association. So on the second level of analysis, on why the medical association itself is a good channel of influence, right? Because I think if these doctors are individuals who are registered with the medical association, they are often exposed to different communities of doctors, conferences of doctors. They are exposed to circulars released by the medical association on how to treat people humanely, right? This is access that we have to the kind of doctors that exist in the military right now through the medical association. And we can tell them to treat people more humanely. If you remove this kind of medical association influence over military doctors, that's when the kind of doctors that you have there are within echo chambers that just consider further torturing people, making their lives a lot worse, but are able to keep them alive as well. I think the medical association is an excellent channel of influence in order to moderate the kinds of activities that happen within Guantanamo Bay and within military doctors. I think the best way to continue or reduce the harm is to allow them to practice the civil service through the medical association. Closing government had 2 unique contributions to this debate. The first thing we proved is that we will force the military industry to change the way they strategize and deal with prisoners. There was very little response, very ineffective response coming from Kelvin. Secondly, Kelvin only responds to this bit about self-interest and evil doctors, which we agree completely with him, because this isn't an evaluation of whether the doctors are self-interested, but the standards by which we hold doctors accountable to and how we expect them to act within as doctors. There was no response to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is engage with Amrit's argument and talk about the responses that Kelvin gave. So
When we flagged out the argument about changing the military industry, we agreed that opening to government merely identifies that you would have less sustainable torture, but that argument does not prove how the military actually changes in the long run. So how does it change from our side? We recognize that the legitimacy torture gauge today is dependent on using the stamp of doctors giving their approval and saying this is a medically qualified way of dealing with prisoners. If you remove this justification, you make it harder for Republicans to pitch it to a vast majority of individuals, especially in the context of today, where the CIA papers already show a less popular perception towards torture. So compounding onto that, you make it harder for torture to be a relevant mechanism to be used in the military industry. The reason why this is true is because torture now, when you have fewer doctors that can sustain the ability to carry out these tortures, when patients die, you don't actually have a place to hide these patients. If you are using Guantanamo Bay, I don't think Cuba is going to give you massive graves to hide all these people that, according to Kelvin Sully, you're going to arrest a lot of other individuals because it becomes harder for you to do these things. And the reason why this is true is because, so like this bit on their argument, Kelvin says you want to be more reasonable, you won't use soldiers, you'll be less qualified. Like using different English words doesn't give you a new extension on your side. The reason why you are less likely to arrest individuals is because when these people are being imprisoned and they know they are not getting information because they make mistakes by killing them suddenly and their information doesn't actually contribute to a specific type of ops. Now within the military itself, you have fewer people trusting this method as being one that is effective within the military. Compounding with the fact that doctors no longer give their stamp of legitimacy, it is easier to build resistance against torture being used as a mechanism. So you wanting to make your argument about less qualified people doing these things must be comparative to a reality where torture becomes increasingly unpopular, and as a result, which is no longer a strategy to be relied upon. How do we then change this when it becomes unpopular? Firstly, it's easy for you to get movements to shut down Guantanamo Bay because arresting massive number of individuals now becomes a lost cause because you're unlikely to be able to extract as much information, because if you say that you're going to cause them more pain, they're going to be dying, then you don't get the value of your information. So that means arresting them becomes an unpopular thing. Even if you claim that they're more likely to arrest individuals, that arresting now is more likely to be resisted because people will be able to identify, like, why are you suddenly arresting massive number of people but not actually able to execute this operation that you claim is a salient cost to our 9/11 reality? So I think the conclusion to this is that when you don't have your legitimacy and you have increasing unpopularity, even if you want to make this ridiculous thing that you have more arrests, all those things become naturally unsustainable on your side. So it dies out as a consequence which you need to deal with as a result of this. Now we're going to talk about the principle. No, thank you. So Kelvin's main question here is, are they evil? I don't think it's about whether or not that they're evil, but how they choose to act and how the medical community responds to this. The reason why it's very important for us to recognize that patients ought to consent, and if they don't have consent to their specific types of treatments, they are harmed, is because doctors are the final gatekeeper of being able to preserve their autonomy in these instances, because they don't actually have knowledge of how to treat themselves and they rely specifically on doctors. That is why when they are being tortured in these instances, they are removed the ability to either consent into those practices and are severely harmed into this. You wouldn't force a patient to take chemotherapy just because you're a doctor. In the same way, we expect them to operate in that same standard to not be as evil as possible. Yeah, go ahead.
Your whole case is premised on the idea that as a result of people dying, it is ineffective. Surely and reasonably, in the process of that person dying, the military gets some information that they did not have previously. Why are they going to trade it off in your way?
So, if you want to claim that information is effective, you have to prove why that information, that minimal amount of information you get to vaguely extract yourself. I don't know what if they even prove that their information literally led to the killing or assassination of big crumbling of terrorist groups. Rather, they just say it's part of the operation. Then it exists in the same scale of being able to use technology or being able to use on-ground intelligence. So I think it's easily substituted by all these other mechanisms. So it doesn't make your information as being one that is highly valued, that you're willing to trade off millions of lives and put them in great amounts of pain in order for you to justify these things. Because if you don't give the justification, you cannot get the benefits of your information, because clearly it doesn't have as much value to begin with. Finally, let's talk about whether these doctors are even deprived of a choice within the military. Because the entire opening opposition makes it sound like doctors are beaten by a stick and not given a choice to be able to leave the military. This argument isn't, you need to be comparative to when they make their choice to join the military. Because if now when the groupie knows that you cannot leave, it's very hard for you to do these things, you're coercive, I'm sure doctors also will be able to access the same amount of knowledge and be able to make the decision before opting into the military. Because you cannot say that propaganda is very strong in an institution where people are trained to save lives. I think that's where the propaganda is the weakest. So in that reality, what we are likely to be able to prove is that more people will not opt into even entering the industry, so they don't have to deal with your reality of not having an alternative to leave, because we shame them, we give them reputational damage, we prosecute them criminally. So you have fewer people wanting to enter into that scenario to begin with. So I think that argument, the contribution we make here significantly proves that no choice doesn't actually materialize in its harm. But finally, they say this team says you want to humanize torturing, this team wants to give whistleblowing. I don't know why you want to wait for so many people to be tortured, put doctors through this coercive system and finally give them whistleblowing. If your claim is people are so patriotic about torturing, when this doctor whistleblows, the Republican politician will call you unpatriotic. They will say you're not serving your country. In that way, you don't get the protection for these individuals. You also then don't get a humanizing of your torturing techniques, because that same legitimacy is used to prop up in your medical conferences why it's very important for us to continue torturing these individuals. So don't tell me you want to humanize these people by sending them through a long chain of disaster and then suddenly you get some negligible or marginal benefit out of this. It's better they don't opt into that system, you make torturing unsustainable, as a result of which you crumble enhanced interrogation techniques as the strategies military use. I think that finality means fewer people get arrested, less doctors are complicit in this, and as a result of that, I think the military changes the way they operate when dealing with prisoners.
So I'm not sure why Dave said we have no extension. I think being the more reasonable is quite an extension. Being the more reasonable case is quite an extension. But before I move on to the case and my way of speech, just a few responses. So let's do OG. We talk about this principle of life and death situations, how it's medical to patients, going through life and death, you might die. So you have to err on the side of caution and assure character of doctor is good. And it's equivalent to malpractice. Like, the thing is, if the doctors are careless enough to go into malpractice, do stuff that's considered malpractice, I think patients can sue them anyway. This has always been the case. I'm not sure why this is different. Like, then the second thing is that I think patients care a lot more about the skill of the doctors, about their health, about whether they will die or not, whether the doctor is evil person or not, whether the doctor is a good, morally upright person or not. Then secondly, you talk about how it's bad for patients, right? Doctors can fuck up and patients will refuse treatment. Like, the thing is, like, if you're an evil doctor, it doesn't mean you're an unskilled doctor. And like, if you don't like this doctor, then just ask the hospital to give you another doctor who isn't a military doctor. Then the third thing they say is that people don't know if the doctors are good or bad, or refuse treatment, and then people cannot get health care. Like, the same response, people really don't care. Like, just people really don't care about whether the doctor's good or bad. They just want to know if they were going to leave or they're going to find a better doctor. That kind of thing. Let's deal with CG then, right? CG's main case is that if there are less doctors, if there are less military doctors doing the torture thing, then there will be more opposition to torture, and in the long run, there will be less torture. I don't think removing medical practitioners will mean more opposition, right? So I think the reason that torture is still around is not due to the fact that the politicians tell you that they are doctors. It's like what politicians tell you is that this information is very necessary for the peace of the country to prevent terrorist attacks on our country, not the fact that they are doctors, therefore we should let torture continue. That's not the main reason. And that's not, I don't think there's a reason at all. I don't think removing that will change anything. But the secondary reason is that I think the fact that most political parties are still in support of this torture, right? There's no real opposition to it. There's no real political capital that you can gain from it, right? The reason is this, right? That the people, the electorate are still self-interested, right? They care more about their own safety, their own peace, their own risk of not getting attacked, rather than some Arab getting, like, some Arabian fellow getting tortured. I don't think they care a lot about that. But to that, I'll ask three questions. Number one, what is the value of a doctor? Because opening government wants doctor to be morally upright. They want them to be morally good. And if not, people will refuse treatment, the poor cannot, and because of that, insurance goes up and poor people cannot receive treatment. Like, first thing, like, people don't care about skill. Like, being a doctor's value is being skillful. That's why I'm not a doctor. I think I'm morally upright as much as I like to think I am. But the fact is I'm dumb. I'm not good enough to be a doctor. That's why I'm not a doctor, right? But the sort of thing you should do is whether you should hold, what you should then hold doctors accountable for, and is whether they are skillful or not, right? Whether they give you the right diagnosis, they give you the right treatment or not, and not for their morality. We don't think OG has anything left in this debate. Right? Sit down. But secondly, will torture support? And this is what CG comes in, right? CG tells you that military changes will change the treatment of torture because suddenly it becomes unpopular, suddenly people will know that because people know there are no medical treatment for torturers. Like, I already told you several reasons why this is not the reason torture continues, right? I think what we have offered to you, what we suggested, has been more reasonable, and we told you that because torture will still be seen as necessary, torture will still be sold as necessary for peace, this information will still be sold as necessary, torture will still continue. Sit down. Like, so, where does this leave us, right? This leaves us with one thing that, the premise that Harvey has set for us, that the information from torture will still be very, very valuable. There's still no real political capital against this, right? And in their world, so in both worlds, there will still be torture, right? So then the question then becomes, what does torture look like in both worlds, right? So I think the most reasonable conclusion to the most reasonable outcome of banning military doctors from civil practice is that due to the shortage of really qualified doctors, you then get, the army is then forced to get less qualified doctors to do this kind of treatment because the information is still valuable, right? So the question then is, when the military use worse debaters, the thing is, they are good enough to keep them alive, right? They're good enough to still torture them but keep them alive. But I think even if they die, they'll just end up arresting more people to torture, right? So you get an aggregate of more information as opposed to just extracting a lot of information from one person, maybe extract a few from many other persons. That's harmful.
Okay, people care about info in both worlds. When torture becomes unsustainable and people die, you address more people, doesn't get the info because it's so sparse. Why wouldn't people just oppose torture and support other methods to get information faster and better?
So I don't know. So I haven't heard of what the outcome of torture is for the last 20 years, right? I don't think it's not like you don't know, right? But politicians will still tell you that it's important, right? And you buy it and you believe it because you care about your safety. You care about not a repeat of 9/11. That's what you care about. It doesn't. You don't need to see. Oh, here's what I extracted from prisoner A, prisoner B. You don't need to see all that. I don't think the political capital to change exists in your world, right? So having said that, right, the best thing for a torture victim is to receive the most efficient amount of pain for the information that he's going to give out. Right? We think on their world, with less qualified doctors, you'll have to receive a lot more pain for the punishment that for the information that they have, as opposed to our world, where you have a qualified medical practitioner who's good, who will extract the information they need and just leave them alone after that, after they get the information that they want. We love efficiency, like, that's fine. Thanks.